Welcome back to the channel. And this is a post from the Caspian Report. Let me make sure that I got their channel name correct. Yep, the Caspian Report. Why Trump is obsessed with Greenland. So let's figure that out. With that being said, we're smoking all my dragons. Divine righteous almighty greats overachieving, never slacking. Today we're flying over to Greenland. And yeah, original link in the description. Here we go. Let's get to the facts.
Trump is back in office and has set his sights on Greenland. This is not the first time he has laid claim to the island, but it's different this time. Trump has refused to assure the world that military force won't be used. And while he may be posturing to get NATO allies to step up on defense, there are sincere strategic reasons why America wants Greenland. Be it trade routes, natural resources, strategic sites, security threats, and so on. At large, Trump believes America's allies are leeching off its resources in a way that hurts the country. He may have a point, but if standing by allies seems costly, it's peanuts compared to the cost of abandoning them. Over the past 4 decades, the Arctic has warmed 4 times faster than the global average. At the current rate, it will have ice-free summers by mid-century, which will have profound consequences for trade and security alike. Most significant for commerce is the emergence of Arctic sea routes as viable alternatives to existing ones. 2 routes in particular stand out. On the Russian side is the Northern Sea route. It stretches from the Bering Strait in the east to the Russian port of Murmansk in the west, and measures 5,300 kilometers in total, with most of it well within Russia's maritime borders. However, the route also serves as a lifeline to Asia's economic giants and is at least 4,200 kilometers shorter than existing routes linking Asian and European markets. Last year, a record volume of cargo, 37.9 million tons, was shipped along the route, and that number will only increase as the globe approaches ice-free summers by mid-century. China and Russia are betting on this, and by cooperating on its development, both seek to gain global leverage. China, in particular, hopes to build a viable alternative to the strategic choke point at Malacca, through which 80% of all its crude oil and natural gas passes. Chinese and Russian estimates predict that trade along the Northern Sea route will rise to 150 million tons by the end of the decade. That's a 4-fold increase in 5 years.
We are not a traditional cafe, we're completely unconventional, and my website...
So everybody want that power, everybody want that control.
Meanwhile, on the Canadian side of the Arctic Circle is the Northwest Passage, measuring 5,700 kilometers in total. It stretches from the Labrador Sea in the east to the Chukchi Sea in the west. And while it is less frequently traveled, global shipping via the passage is almost 4,000 kilometers shorter than going through the Panama Canal. Nonetheless, there is a problem. The Northwest Passage traverses the maritime borders of 3 states, Denmark, Canada, and the United States. Even though they are all 3 NATO allies, they don't see eye to eye in regard to the Northwest Passage. Canada, in particular, has historically asserted its sovereignty by denying access to foreign shipping and forcibly relocating indigenous populations into the unpopulated north. The United States, however, says the Northwest Passage is an international waterway and has routinely challenged Canada in diplomatic contexts. For America, the question of the Northwest Passage is one of principle. If Washington recognizes Canada's claims over the passage, it would set a precedent allowing other coastal states to claim sovereignty over international waters unilaterally. This in turn would undermine the freedom of navigation, a pillar of America's power projection. And so, as the ice melts, it also thaws geopolitical frontiers. Without the Arctic ice to separate the hemispheres, America is set on a collision course with Russia and China. Trump and his advisors want to keep the dog off the lawn, but to do that, they need their Arctic allies to step up. Greenland and Canada are key to American dominance over the Arctic. From the American perspective, Denmark and Canada must invest massively and rapidly to establish a forward presence in the Arctic Circle to free up US forces for a potential conflict in the Pacific. Chiefly, the United States needs forward operating air bases in the northern parts of Greenland to enhance its surveillance and reconnaissance capabilities so that it can keep track of hostile powers. Failing to set up those forward bases could otherwise undermine America's first response capabilities if a bigger conflict happens there. However, Denmark and Canada are the weak links in NATO's Arctic defenses. The former lacks the resources, while the latter lacks the will. And so, the American leadership believes that if its call for militarization is not heeded, it must take charge of the Arctic directly. Had Trump been better at articulating himself, it wouldn't have triggered the political crisis it has, even though his strategic
They coming at Trump. Said if he would have been better at articulating himself.
outline is valid. The Russians have embarked on a program of Arctic militarization since 2005, while America has fallen behind in nearly all aspects. Russia has more air bases and airstrips along its northern coast, which improves its ability to operate in the Arctic. It also has more ground force bases than NATO in the Arctic Circle and more non-operational bases that could host military assets in the future or be logistically relevant in a conflict. Still more, Russia's icebreaker fleet vastly outnumbers those of other nations. Official data shows it has 8 nuclear-powered icebreakers and 33 diesel-powered ones. Admittedly, icebreakers play a small role in military operations, but they are nevertheless necessary to maintain an Arctic presence.
Okay, let me stop it right here. I seen this movie the other day, right? I'm trying to remember what it was called. I forgot what it was called. What lurks beneath or something like that. And you had America. They was like in this submarine, and they was going at it with Russia. They kept hearing singing, like literally just singing underwater. They didn't know where it was coming from. They thought it was like Russia doing some stuff, some like psychological warfare. But long story short, ended up being a creature from the sea, right? A creature or being, right? Like stuff you hear in myths. And to really, once again, make a long story short, something keeps sticking out to me. She said, she was talking, when the creature started to speak, she said, men are going to blow up the world. Men are going to blow up the world. Their weapons are going to block out the sun. Men are going to war. Pretty much it was like they're the problem. And for some reason it's making me think of that. Like, as things escalate, right? I don't know, man. I don't know.
The point is that while the Russian military may have fumbled in tactics in Ukraine, it enjoys an edge in the Arctic. This has raised alarm bells in the Pentagon, not just due to Russian activity, but also Chinese. Beijing has massively expanded its Arctic footprint and is working closely with Russia to secure dominance in the Northern Hemisphere. China and Russia have recently increased their naval patrols there, sometimes skirting just off the US territorial waters, to send a message of intent and capacity. If the two were to pool together their resources and capabilities and set up a common strategic roadmap, they could give the Americans a run for their money.
I'm thinking about starting to run on the treadmill again.
And that's the thing, Russia and China teaming up. Woo.
Greenland is massive in size, but just over 56,000 people call it home. Outside the capital Nuuk, there are no roads that connect the towns to each other, and the island is often considered one of the world's least accessible places. Not surprisingly, its GDP is just above $2 billion, with fishing being the most significant sector. Since 1979, Greenland has had home rule, and self-rule since 2009. It has its own parliament and prime minister, and most government responsibilities fall under Greenlandic jurisdiction, save for foreign affairs and national defense. For much of its history, Greenland was a geopolitical backwater. All that changed in the 20th century. After Denmark fell to Nazi Germany in 1940, the United States oversaw the affairs of the island and constructed numerous military installations and monitoring stations. After the war, Greenland became the centerpiece of America's Arctic security, and the reasons for this are numerous. Firstly, along with Iceland and the United Kingdom, Greenland forms a 1,500-kilometer wide choke point that separates the Arctic Ocean from the Atlantic. It's called the GIUK Gap, and it is crucial for tracking and intercepting hostile vessels to ensure the security of transatlantic shipping lanes and undersea communication cables. Meanwhile, to the northwest of Greenland sits Thule Air Base, now known as the Pituffik Space Base. It is one of the most advanced ballistic missile warning systems in the world and is the keystone in America's Arctic defenses. The base also monitors space activities, including satellite tracking and space debris observation. However, Pituffik is but a single base and can't carry America's Arctic strategy alone. More such forward operating bases are needed. By mid-century, the PLA Navy would want to establish a continual presence in the Arctic Ocean. Chinese submarines could decide to operate more frequently there. To detect such submarines, additional air bases are needed. Anti-submarine planes like the P-8 Poseidon are pretty effective, but increasing the number of aerial patrols across a vast area like the Arctic Ocean requires many more air bases. Now imagine if Russia and China reached an agreement to station Chinese aircraft at Russia's Arctic air bases. It could overwhelm America's air defenses. So, to develop proper military capabilities, the Pentagon needs to set up an array of systems, counter-systems, and auxiliary systems. Essentially, the status quo as it stands today is not enough. The United States needs to militarize the Arctic from top to bottom. Denmark can't do that by itself, not even with Europe's support. And so Trump believes Denmark needs to step aside and let America take the lead in the coming battle with Russia and China. That's what this ordeal ultimately boils down to. The secondary goals relate to Greenland's mineral deposits, which, according to the US Geological Survey, are the world's largest undeveloped deposits. At least 43 of 50 critical minerals are found there. These minerals are essential for the transition to renewable technologies, but are also highly susceptible to supply chain disruptions. As it stands, China controls 60% of the world's rare earth metals and contributes 90% of the global market share. Europe holds the short end of the stick. It's running out of ammunition, and one critical metal is at the center of it all: antimony. No antimony means no bullets, no missiles, no military electronics. Without it, NATO's capacity collapses. But here's the problem. The West produces almost none of this metal. China and Russia control nearly 100% of the global supply.
That's crazy. That's scary for the US to think that. Like, oh man, Russia and China control. Yeah, that's.
What's more, China recently banned exports of antimony, sending prices soaring to a record $47,500 per ton. They did the same with gallium and germanium, which are key metals used in semiconductors. These export restrictions show that China is using critical resources to gain leverage, and that.
Hold on. All these resources from the planet, right? And this is what man is pretty much doing, just making weapons and bumping heads, and I mean, all these resources. We're sitting here, this whole video, it's just about control, power, Game of Thrones. Oh, I need this, and that. Like, this is crazy.
That's where today's sponsor, Military Metals Corp, comes in. See the ticker on screen. Military Metals is working to secure a Western-controlled supply of antimony. Their flagship project in Slovakia is one of the largest known deposits outside of China and Russia. It has a historical resource with over 60,000 tons of high-grade antimony, which is worth more than $3 billion at today's prices. On top of that, Military Metals owns 2 additional past-producing antimony assets in North America, including the West Gore mine in Canada, which already has stockpiled material ready for processing. With NATO and the Pentagon rushing to secure supply, Military Metals is in a prime position to be part of the solution. Again, their ticker symbol is on the screen. I will also leave a link to their website in the description. Just make sure to do your own due diligence.
Man, it's just like, I keep that part in that movie keeps going through my head about men are gonna blow up the world. Like, they gotta be stopped. Like, that keeps going through my head. Like, what this just keeps escalating, and what's gonna be the result? At the end of the day, there's so many crises going on around the world. People that's homeless, all type of stuff, and it's like, here go men fighting over resources that the earth gave for free, instead of just trying to come to an agreement, trying to figure, like, it's just wild. It's just wild. Sure, there's gonna be a lot of people that disagree with what I'm saying, but no, it's wrong. It's ridiculous.
Needs to secure its own supply chain, and in Greenland it has lobbied for the prohibition of business deals with China. This has worked to some extent, but Chinese firms are persistent. For China, Greenland is a means to gain a foothold in the Arctic, and it's using investment and infrastructure projects to get access. Greenland is the perfect target. It is cash-strapped and all too eager for direct foreign investment, which places it at high risk of debt trap diplomacy. For added context, debt trap diplomacy is when a powerful country lends money to a weaker country knowing it might struggle to pay it back. When the weaker country can't repay, the powerful country takes control of essential resources, land, or political influence in return. Plenty of nations have taken the bait, but the risk is even bigger for Greenland because it wants to become independent. Since 2009, calls for independence have grown stronger. So much so that today, most local political parties aim for total independence from Denmark with a deadline of 2030. The local Inuit population is not thrilled with Denmark. The wounds of imperial times still haven't fully healed, and Denmark hasn't made it easy with its historic social experiments. For instance, in the 1960s and 1970s, thousands of Inuit women and girls were fitted with contraceptive devices without consent. It was a means to control.
Nah, see what I'm talking about, child? Like, violating the indigenous people. I'm sure there's so much stuff that we could eat that could just heal us that we probably don't even know about because they've been, taken and destroyed or hidden in some laboratory somewhere and processed into something else. I don't listen. Ridiculous. That's all I gotta say. Like, this is ridiculous. It's just about power and control. That's it. That's why it's like, all this for what? Like, Game of Thrones.
Population growth, and social experiments such as these were plenty. So, understandably, Greenlanders prefer going their own separate way. At least 67% of the population supports independence, and in 2023, local politicians even drafted a constitution in anticipation of it. However, Trump's statement has thrown local politics into turmoil and could, in fact, speed up the whole independence process. Meanwhile, back in Denmark, Trump's statements have come as a shock, and there is a widespread sense of betrayal. Denmark has been one of America's closest allies. It has participated in nearly every major US military operation whenever the Americans asked, even the most controversial ones like Iraq. Denmark also teamed up with the United States to spy on European leaders, and it has always bought American military equipment over European alternatives. Trump's rhetoric threatens the territorial integrity of a NATO member state and undermines the legitimacy of the alliance as a whole. Yet there are other unintended effects too. In response to Trump's statements, Denmark has pledged to pump an additional $2 billion into Arctic security. It will buy new warships, long-range drones, and satellites to keep an eye on its icy backyard. The pledge is part of Denmark's $26 billion 10-year military upgrade. The Danes hope that more defense spending will keep Greenland off Trump's shopping list, and that may have been Trump's point all along. Geopolitics has a way of forcing things forward. Trump's reckless rhetoric may be his own, but the motivations behind his rhetoric are not. The actor may improvise, but the plot was set long before. I've been your host Shivan from Caspian Report.
The actor may improvise, but the plot was set long before. I hope y'all caught that. Yeah, this I'm not gonna lie. From the sounds of all that, all that they was talking about, and you know how men, always got to make things extra complicated, and simple things that they taught us in kindergarten about just treat others how you want to be treated, and and all this and respect. That's not the reality of the world. As y'all can see, that's not the reality. People doing experiments on people, people stealing, people extorting people, different lands, all type of stuff, and just putting these names on it, to putting these different names on it to make it sound like, okay, well, it's just this, we're going to call it this, but then it'll be extortion and robbery and all type of stuff. What? Wild. But, man, it does look like it's escalating, or like it will escalate, I'm not going to lie. It's a lot going down right now. It's a lot. So, as I keep saying, we're going to stay tuned. And yeah, what y'all think about this in the comments, let me know. Original link in the description. If you enjoy this reaction, definitely don't hesitate to hit that like, that subscribe, that notification bell. And that movie, that it was like a mermaid, kept going through my head. What was crazy about that is there was these people from the UK in there too who were like working with the US government, and they were like, we had intel for years about these creatures in the sea. They were like, men just, it was easier for men to turn them into myths than to actually face, than to think that monsters are real or whatever. Even though humans be the real monsters, but it's like, point I'm trying to make is there's so much, and for a lot of people, this may feel like wild what I'm about to say, but there's also so much factors that go into so much that we don't think about. That's all I'm gonna say. Because humans think we're the only people on this planet. We think we're the only thing popping. That's the ego of men. Men think that they're the only thing popping on this planet. They think that they're the only thing advanced and the smartest and then okay, I'm gonna stop there. I'll see y'all in the next video. Much love.